Hey, we're going to give everybody a second just to load in, but welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today to talk a little bit about talent transfer. My name is Rob Dowrtz. Nice to meet everybody, or nice to see everybody. Thanks to those who are joining us, who are some of our existing clients and collaborators. We're excited to share some survey and interview data that we've collected over the last couple of years, really, and to talk about this concept of a talent transfer. Now, admittedly, this is an ominous title, how to avoid a talent transfer. We could very easily have said, and maybe appropriately said, how to position yourself as the beneficiary of a talent transfer. Because unfortunately, we are seeing this across the country through our clients' eyes and also through our own interviews and surveys and our own work directly. But there is a way to avoid it. There's a way to position yourself so that you can actually be the ones that take advantage of this talent transfer. So with that said, we're going to talk a little bit about who we are for those of you who are not familiar with us. So Become Unmistakable, our firm. We're two things primarily. We're a software company and we're a leadership training firm. And we offer various types of leadership training, but it's all really combined and focus on how do you create connected teams? How do you bring more connection into your organizations to lead people-centric cultures that really speak into the next generations of employee, which, as you'll see, connection is incredibly important to them. And as many of you, I'm sure, already know that. So our business, Become Unmistakable, is really grounded in three primary principles. One is executive leadership. Many of us have filled the seat of the CEO, COO, talent leader. And so the important part of this is that we have done many of the things that we now teach and train and that live in our software. We've done it directly, and we've done it with some success across different industries, specifically financial services, construction, manufacturing, but then beyond that as well. So that's kind of point number one. Point number two is our tools and training are based in brain science. We have colleagues who have studied brain science extensively. We have brain-based coaches certified that will deliver our training. And it's really important to understanding why many of the things that we do work. So the science does actually matter, and it does inform everything that we do. And then finally, analytics, data, surveys, and that's going to be the topic that we're going to unpack today. We do speak across all of these topic areas and train across all of them, but today we're really going to focus in on some data that we've been collecting over the last couple of years, broadly, anecdotally, in person, and via technology that are really informing some of the recommendations we're making today for our clients and just some of our own decisions as businesses ourselves. So we're going to frame our conversation today around Bridget. Bridget is what we call a rising leader, also known as a millennial, right? That's how she presents from a generational standpoint. And Bridget is looking for a job right now. She's made a decision. She's going to look for a job. Her company has gone back to a fully work from work situation from a work from home through the pandemic. And she's just decided this is not for me. So a little bit about her backstory is really important. So again, I mentioned she's a rising leader, a millennial. She graduated in 2007. Right out of school, she took her dream job. For her, that was running an art gallery. So that was 2007. We know what happens shortly thereafter in 2008, right? The Great Recession hits, her art gallery closes, and she finds herself over the next several years either unemployed, underemployed, and then finally finds herself in a situation where she finds a new job that she feels like she can really sink her teeth into and grow with. And she starts out, but it's completely unrelated to her prior education. So she joins that. She works in it for 6 years. She rises through the ranks of some responsibility and finds herself, okay, I'm here, I belong, I have some responsibility. And then a global pandemic hits. And so her legs have been cut out from her under her a second time. The projects that she's working on are on hold now. Everybody's looking to the following year because everybody's just taken a big pause because of the pandemic. And so uncertainty kind of comes into her life again. And we like to say it's her second bite at the rotten apple of uncertainty and disruption. So that's what's driving her decisions today. So we're going to talk an awful lot about Bridget, and this is another rising leader, Catherine, who, like Bridget, has made the decision, and in fact, already made the decision in going from a work from home setting back to a work from work, that she was going to look for a new opportunity. And she did already. So she has already made the transition into a new position where she's working remotely for another company. And we're going to unpack her story a little bit later, but she's lived that same life, right? So that situation of disruption twice, and now she's finding herself, she made her decision. Bridget's finding herself looking around and making the decision that she's going to make next. So to really understand those stories, we're going to dig into a little bit of context building first, and we're going to look back to 2020. I apologize. We call it a year to forget because we all want to forget it. We're tired of talking about it. But it's also a year to remember, because there's an awful lot of examples and lessons that we have to stay connected to really understand what's going on today. And that's where we'll go next. So we'll talk about what's going around us right now. We'll unpack our most recent survey around 2021, where we dig into this. Okay, where are you? Are you in the beneficiary column or are you in the victim column, based on what we've learned directly from our survey respondents? And that will frame the third portion of our talk today, which is, what does the future of work even look like? So that's where we'll spend a good amount of time. Spoiler alert, we're talking about a lot of connection flexibility, and that is incredibly important. And we'll introduce a new topic, sense of belonging, which we've dug into and is very near and dear to our hearts at BU. So we hope you'll come out of this with some understanding of a simple fact that generation matters. And I think everybody understands this, but we're going to put a little bit more meat behind it. Also, to get a sense for how priorities are shifting, and what we need to do to be prepared for those shifting priorities. And I can tell you that as some of our established leaders, which that was how I present generationally, we have some blind spots and we have to be really careful about it. And then finally, we want everyone here to be the beneficiary of this talent migration that's already started. And it's actually gaining steam, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, that you track it. And you've read the many surveys and many reports that are coming out from organizations that are actually very large, that are speaking from a similar script. So let's get started looking back. 2020, a year to forget and remember. So this is one of our very first Zoom happy hours. If I never participate in or see another Zoom happy hour, as long as I live, I will die a happy man. We're all just really tired of talking about it, thinking about it. So again, apologize for putting you through it, but it's really important to think about what we experienced. In this photo, this was another experience that we all had a version of, right? People just sitting up in bed and taking those first calls. And I'm not looking my best in this shot, but hey, whatever. But what we did here, so our buddy Pete in the lower left, this is how he took every morning call. And one day on his birthday, we decided we would all do exactly what he does, which is put on that same white t-shirt and just sit up in bed and took the call. That was pretty fun. And of course, you all have this in your virtual lives, if you've been work from home or blend, and not fully work from work, you see what is actually a welcome thing with kids coming into the mix. And in fact, we really embraced this concept in our business, and it became a very, very regular occurrence, particularly for the millennials. They have young families, often are rising leaders, to have their kids in our meetings, and we encouraged it and really embraced it. Even with my coffee drinking, senior in high school who's standing up and is taller than I am. So anyway, this experience, our experience, really led us very quickly to feel some of our own burnout and some of our own just tension. So we decided to go out quickly during the pandemic in the spring of 2020, early spring, and launch a generational survey. And we're really trying to get behind, okay, everybody's got their own version of this, but how is this presenting across generations? How are people feeling about it? What is company culture? Something obviously that we're very focused on. What does it mean in a digital workplace? And so that was really our purpose. It was really about the work from home, isolation, folks like us, because when the pandemic hit, we were sent, to the sidelines. We were a non-essential business. And what's it mean to them? So we focused on areas around communication, Where does technology fit? How does culture really get defined in this situation? And a number of other things. And we're not going to go through the full report, but we just want to talk about some key things that were really insightful to us and some actual surprises, because that will inform where we are today. So just to ground everybody, because I get criticized for this often, talking about generations as if everybody understands which generation means what. We talk about the emerging workforce, right? All the way to the left in this are Gen Zs. That's the under 27 crowd, right? Those are our youngest folks in our organizations, a large generation equal in size to the millennials that is now, coming in greater numbers, but still entering the workforce. Our rising leaders in the center, that's our millennials, right? 27 to 41, 42, right in that range. These are people, this is the largest group of any of our workforces, and they do most of the work in our companies. They are well-trained, they have a good amount of experience, and they're extremely, I will tell you right away, overworked in our environment. But that's our rising leaders. And then people like me, Gen X and Boomers, we've lumped together. This is the over 42 crowd, and it's the established leaders. And we present very differently as a group, as you'll find out. So we'd like to get a little audience participation here. So we'd ask that you, we're going to open our polling function and answer a couple of questions for us. Looking back into our survey in 2020 about communication with their managers, focusing specifically on millennials and our Gen Zs, right? So this is the 41 and under crowd. How do they want to communicate with their managers? How often? And so here's your answer choices: once per month, once per week, multiple times per week, or at least once per day. So take a shot. What do you think? Got a lot of stuff coming in. Okay, this is great. So we can see, I believe everybody can see this now. We have, it's actually pretty well spread around, but at least once per week, multiple once per day. So a good distribution here. And so everybody, of course, knows their people fairly well, because in fact, multiple times per week, or at least once per day was the answer, depending on whether we were talking about millennials or Gen Zs. So it sounds like you all are pretty well versed, and that's what we found. Gen Z and millennials wanted, in what you see here, 100% of our Gen Z crowd wanted at least multiple times per week in communication, and millennials, almost 3/4, wanted the same. Now, when we break that into at least once per day, again, 3/4 of our Gen Zs wanted at least one time per day communication, and the millennials, almost half of them wanted it. And the reality was, we found something very different, that they were not receiving that kind of a communication. And for the Gen Zs specifically, we found that a good chunk of them, around 40% of them, wanted multiple times per day of communication with their direct manager. So let's try another question quickly. How do they prefer their communication, right? So we've got, and now we're going to focus specifically on Gen Z, this group that wants multiple times per day. How do they like to receive their communication? And here's your choices: text or instant message, in person, phone call, or email. So let's take a moment. Let's open the poll. Please participate. Yeah, for sure. So we got a lot of folks. Okay, so we have the vast majority are suggesting text and instant messaging. And that's exactly what we would have thought as well. This was our biggest surprise of last year, and one that created some pause, because the answer is in person. And the answer is in person by a pretty significant margin. So if you look at this graphic, in the inner circle of this, the Gen Zs are in orange. Almost 60% of them said they wanted to have their connection in person, their communication in person. And they wanted it, from our earlier slide, multiple times a day. And of course, in isolation, either socially distant in the work from work environment or truly distant in the work from home environment. They weren't getting it. And so that really created some serious pause. And of course, wanting it in person though, like that's a shock to us. This is our most tech savvy, if not tech dependent group amongst us. And yet they're calling for in person. And if you think about it, it does make some sense. These are the people that are youngest and newest in their roles, have the least security relative to their young careers, and they seek mentorship, right? They want in-person guidance from their direct managers to help them really develop some security and productivity and a career, right? How do they become successful? So it does make some sense, although it was a bit of a blind spot for us and obviously for all of you as well. Okay, one more for now, benefits. Now, I believe this is going to be a little bit of a layup. We're going to talk about millennials, what attracts and retains millennials from a benefits standpoint. Is it actual health insurance? Is it work-life balance, relationships, vacation, or salary? Okay, so we got a lot of them in. A little bit more. I'm not sure if everybody can see this now, but many of you definitely, okay, here we go. Many of you definitely know your rising leader workforce millennials well. Many of you responded work-life balance. Since the time I think millennials were in diapers, they have wanted work-life balance and more than anything else, right? And it's not by a small margin. So this graphic represents the responses from both Gen Z and millennials to that question. Gen Zs said we want salary, right? We want money. These are the children of the Great Recession. They saw their parents lose jobs, become underemployed, feeling financially insecure. And that is presented across the generation this way for some time. So salary. Millennials, on the other hand, work-life balance and the size of the purple bubble is on purpose. It is by a wide margin that they have really valued work-life balance over anything, including money. And so that's what they took with them into the pandemic. And that's what they, well, I'm not going to spoil anything too much, but that's what they've had challenged in a significant way. So another quick thing to share. Work from home. How does the modern workforce really feel about working from home when they're forced into separation? And this was something we found, what we thought was tech savvy, tech dependent Gen Z that we now understand wanted multiple times per day of in-person communication with their managers was also 4 to 5 times less comfortable working from home. These are people in small spaces, working in small apartments with roommates, living at home, many situations where that just it's just unsustainable and uncomfortable. So that was another kind of a wake-up call for us. Next, we shifted to screen time. We asked the question, how much is too much and how much time are you spending on screen? And we start with our Gen Zs. 87% of those survey respondents said, hey, 6 hours and above, that's just too much. 87%, big group of them. I think somewhat good news, only 51% of them were actually working that much. So half of them are saying, you know, we're doing okay as it relates to that. When we look at our millennial group, 87%, the same group said that 6 hours was too much, but as you can already see, 91% of them said we are working that plus. So this balance that they had experienced and enjoyed, not happening. At the same time, you can think of those earlier pictures that we shared about our own team. These are people often with young families that are balancing work and home in a huge way and spending all these hours on screen. And these are screen time, not just working on your computer doing work. These are screen time that the question was focused on how much time are you spending really meeting, really interacting on screen. And so it's the serious stuff of burnout. Okay, so we've focused on Gen Zs and millennials solely so far. You're probably wondering if anybody out there is my age. You're wondering, okay, what about us? So the established leader category, right? So kind of that 40s and up folks that are doing often, much of the leadership still in our organizations before we get displaced by the millennials and the Gen Zs. We have what we would consider some pretty serious blind spots. So when it comes time to screen time, to talk about screen time, we said about half of us said 6+ hours is too much. The other half, no big deal, we're okay. In fact, most of that other half said there is no upper limit. Screen time doesn't matter. That's how we operate and how we show up is whatever time it takes, that's all we do, right? And we're not going to suggest that it's going to be any different. So blind spot number one, we don't seem to care so much about how much time we spend on screen. Blind spot number two, we feel to an overwhelming degree, 92%, that we have the resources to feel comfortable working from home. Just my own personal experience, I have a very comfortable home office. I can work there just as comfortably as I can work right here. No problem at all, no lost productivity. It's isolated. I've got plenty of space, I have storage, etc. Not the case for everybody that comes after us. Blind spot number three is communication. So 65% of our established leaders said that they really wanted communication from their manager no more than 1 to 2 times per week. In fact, preferably less. And I can tell you from personal experience that I was raised under the expectation that the less time I needed to take from my manager, the better I was doing my job. And no news was good news, and put your head down and get work done. And that, in fact, is the biggest blind spot of all, I think, for our generations, is that we're actually proud of what you see here, and we consider it one of our greatest strengths. We do whatever it takes. The less communication and more independence, the better. And that strength is also our greatest weakness, because I'm not sure we see it for those behind us. And our 2021 survey will bear that out. So that's when we started talking and writing about an impending talent transfer. Was really the spring of 2020, based on two things. Our Gen Zs are out of touch. They're not getting the personal touch that they need. And therefore, as employment markets come back, they may not, in fact, they may in fact look for greener pastures. And then the even bigger issue, the millennials being out of balance. That thing that they've craved since day one is no longer available to them, because they are really carrying the loads of most of our business. So that's 2020. We're going to move into 2021, beneficiary or victim. We decided to go back out and test the waters again, check in with people, see how generations were doing. Now that many of us have returned back to work, some are still transitioning into the work from work environment or returning to a blend. And how, looking back, do people feel that things went and what's really important to them today? So this is the cover of our 2021 Culture Check-In Survey, which you'll all get a copy of if you want to receive it. We'll have a QR code up at the end of the presentation that you can scan and get it directly. And we went out. We had a few things that we were checking in on that were similar, but some new concepts that we were testing. But here's what we were really after. Have we lost connection to each other, especially as we've gone into complete distance, right? Physical distance, or also social distance. This has actually been the most polarizing thing that any of us has really experienced from an emotional standpoint. And so that was important to us. How have leaders performed, right, through this pandemic? How important is creating a sense of belonging to employee retention? This is not a brand new concept. It's something that's been out there for some time, but it's something we're very focused on. And we wanted to make sure that we understood what it meant and also where it fits in terms of really trying to attract and particularly retain employees. And does generation matter? And boy, does it. And we'll share that. And the final question, which we've already answered with our opening, is the talent transfer upon us. And sadly, the answer is yes. So it's up to us to figure out how we can be the beneficiary. So let's start with the good news. Overall, when we take a look at all of our survey respondents across industries, across generations, across the country, employees felt that they were cared for and treated fairly, right, through the pandemic. So this was a bad situation, but at least everybody kind of was in the same boat. And so these three questions, I feel I'm treated fairly, especially the top two, and I feel I have a voice. Those are things that we're focusing in on fairness. And we see scores that are pretty far to the right, 10-point scale in the 7s or even 8. Surprising, actually, but also something that was encouraging. And then the last question here, how likely would you be, we're very direct with this one, how likely would you be to leave if you in fact got an offer? And here we're looking for something below the midpoint. So the 5 point is seriously consider. Okay, so here it came in at 4.3. So overall, it feels pretty good that people aren't really running for the doors, or so it seems. Of course, you know the end of the story. The story doesn't end there. Then we asked, questions around connection, and we asked these four. The top two, have you felt more or less or the same about connection to your team? And then the next is about isolation and weakening work relationships. In this situation, we're looking for midpoint answers. Okay, so anything around the midpoint means we're both, mostly the same. We saw a little bit of erosion in some cases, or even a little bit more connection in other cases. But we felt encouraged by this. Again, we're overall data. And then in the last 90 days, have you talked about with your manager what you value and aspire to and what your concerns and frustrations are? Still, maybe a little bit of erosion here overall, but pretty far out to the right and kind of getting into the 6s and close to 7, which was encouraging. But when we peel back the onion and we start looking at generational differences, we start to find a focus on our rising leaders, also known as millennials. And we found in this case that 25%, so a good chunk, felt serious feelings of isolation and weakening work relationships. So much further to the left, 4 and below. And then we found that a similar number, 25%, had not had any conversations with their managers around aspirations or concerns. So they're feeling really disconnected and maybe even abandoned through this process. So it's a good chunk. So we thought, let's dig a little bit deeper. And what we found through our surveys is our folks on the left, Gen Z emerging, they pretty much sat this one out. They were relatively underrepresented, only about 10% of our survey. And then on the other side, our Gen X and Boomers, we are doing just fine. In fact, we're doing quite well through this whole pandemic situation. But the folks in the middle, our millennials, are suffering more than anyone. And so this is the point in the presentation where we really shift our focus specifically onto Bridget, Catherine, and her and their cohort of millennial rising leaders, as we call them. So let's take a look at their data. So we asked these questions, these 9 questions, we asked people to rate performance of management. So everything from social and emotional well-being, as you can read, all the way down to physical safety. And what we found was a fairly significant drop-off of how our rising leaders felt relative to the overall report, which was concerning. And in fact, we found that at least 35%, now much bigger, and this is the bottom, it was 35 maybe to 42%, depending on which category that we're talking about. I know I'm getting a little granular in the data, but that were highly critical of their managers on how they did each of these things. And that means a 4 and below, right? So this is something that's pretty serious. And the 3 that have the arrows at the top, social and emotional well-being, employee connection, and setting clear expectations were the biggest discrepancies between how the rising leaders felt about it and the overall, which was really about the older generations because Gen Z took a seat, how they felt or how big the difference was the biggest in those categories. So we're going to come back for one more question. And so if you would indulge us one more time, what now? It's the same question that we asked in 2020. The one that millennials since they were in diapers were answering, work-life balance, what keeps and attracts these rising leaders? And we decided to throw some different versions of answers at them, but comp and benefits we lumped together. Sense of belonging, new concept for them. Work-life balance, of course, we had to keep that in there. Career growth and autonomy. So we can launch the polling. What do you think was the number one thing that keeps or attracts these folks? Got some good responses coming in. I love these responses. So I think everybody should now be able to see. So here's our distribution, right? Sense of belonging got a couple votes. Work-life balance did make an appearance, but most of you are really focusing on career growth and autonomy. And I will suggest that these are very important things, but the actual answer is money. And it's money, and it's not by a small margin. This was a big wake-up call for us. So compensation and benefits showed up number one by a wide margin, followed by work-life balance. It still matters, although it's taken a different turn in its definition, as we'll share later. And then sense of belonging did show up in a meaningful way. And comp and benefits was by a long margin, right? 70%, the number one over and above our perennial leader, work-life balance. And if you think back about Bridget's example, this is someone who was taken, and all of her, her folks within the same generation have had a version of this, possibly 2 bites of that rotten apple, which have also meant financial disruption. And so they're looking around them saying, I've had a rough time through this pandemic. I'm not that happy with how leadership has managed my situation. In some cases, they're being forced back into a full-time office situation while they want to cling to some of the benefits of a balance or a blend. And they're saying, show me the money. And it is something that we need to be aware of. And that, of course, there are levers we can pull, because we still see 2 right here that we can use to attract or keep them. So when it came to this question that we asked, or that we shared before, the very direct one, if you had an offer today, what would you do with it? And we showed that it came out less than seriously consider as an overall. Well, our rising leaders think a little differently about that question. In fact, almost half of them said they would at least seriously consider it. The more challenging and concerning is that over 30% of them basically said we're out the door. These are folks that are highly, highly critical of their current situations, and they're actively looking, and we need to figure out how, in fact, we keep them interested. But even more so, to go on offense to attract others that are leaving other companies. And that's where we're going to turn our attention next. So I'm going to pause here for just a second and just mention to everybody that the chat is open. So if anybody has a question about anything you're seeing here, please go ahead and share that with us, and we'll try to funnel those in as we're going. If not, we'll get to the end, and then we'll answer some of those. We have one question. Can you repeat it?
Yeah. So how do you handle dealing with a blended work environment? People who are either remote or aren't comfortable in the office, and people who are in person.
So how do you handle the blend? Having people who are in the office but not comfortable, and those that are at home. So I actually would like to postpone the answer of that, because we're going to talk about some of those things. But it's a great question, and the key to that is one size does not fit all. And so actually, if you wouldn't mind, we're going to kind of go through a good chunk more of this presentation, and then maybe address that a little bit through the slides, and then we'll pick up whatever we don't get to at the end. So what does the future of work really look like? And what can we do to speak into what really are millennials, because that's where we're focusing, what they really care about, and how do we make them feel comfortable, either at home or at work. So the future of work is really about connecting people through distance, and think about this, either from a blended standpoint or a fully work from home standpoint, but also think of it from a work from work standpoint. Again, we've gone through one of the most polarizing experiences in any of our lifetimes, and forced into social distance, even in the work from work environment. And now when people are coming back, there is a lot of emotional distance, even if you're all together. And we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. And again, we'll come back to Bridget, right? So this is what Bridget, you saw what she experienced and how she was feeling. And today, the future of work is really about how does she combine her work life and then blend it with her home life, because she's had the benefit of both. Now, the really important thing, though, is how does Bridget stay connected to everybody in between? How does she stay connected to her organization and her ability to connect her job to its purpose and its performance? And how does she stay connected to people? Because that's what she really cares about, both at work and at home. So to think about how we assess and move forward with some of these things, we're going to go back to that question that we've already asked twice. What keeps and attracts a rising leader? Okay, so we saw historically work-life balance. Now it's all about compensation and benefits. But we have to have some other ways, right, to appeal to them. So we peeled this back a little bit more and we looked at the top 3 responses of millennials. And when you look at the top 3, even though comp and benefits is number 1, work-life balance comes into the mix with a little different flavor, basically neck and neck, right? So the people are really still focused on work-life balance. So that's lever number 1 that we can pull. Lever number 2 is the sense of belonging. Again, not a surprise. You saw the data earlier, but we realize now that these 3 are the things that we have to worry about most. But let me just pose something. Compensation and benefits. This is not to suggest that everybody has to go raise their wages, right? Comp and benefits have always had to be competitive to keep anybody, right? So I don't know that there's that much that's changed here. I have heard and seen some modest adjustments based on worries about competitive factors or people being lured away. There have been some proactive compensation adjustments, but it's not massive. So I think we can really focus our time on work-life balance in its newest form and sense of belonging. Okay, lever number 1, work-life balance. What we're finding through our surveys and through our interviews is it's really taking on a new flavor, and that is flexible work schedule. So we're going to come back to Catherine, whom you haven't heard that much about, other than the fact that she's a millennial and she made the decision to go ahead and take a new job because she did not want to go back to the work from work situation. So she wants flexibility. Not only that, she wants to have the ability to define what flexibility actually looks like, determine when she works, how she works, where she works. And so she made that decision. Now, you could be sitting here saying, I'm a work from work company, always have been, we never missed a beat. This doesn't apply to me. I would suggest some caution there because in her situation, not only did she make the decision to leave that, but she did it and took a job in a different geography because geographic boundaries are now gone. In her situation, she's actually local here in the state of Michigan. And we tried to hire her. And we fell in love with her. She's fantastic, super talented. And actually, she fell in love with us too, right? She wanted to join us. When it came time, though, to make an offer, she was working for a New York-based company. And we gave her our offer, which we felt we were going to the end of our limits. And we were offering her less than half of what she was earning remotely for this New York-based company. So that is happening. It's just scratching the surface now. Anecdotally, we've heard many examples of this. Companies from smaller markets that are having their people poached by those from larger markets that have higher pay scales, and they're getting a bargain in their minds while giving people significant raises. So any position within any company, work from home, work from work, does not matter. They are susceptible to this happening. And so you really have to figure out how you speak into what's most valuable to your people in order to avoid that happening. Because unfortunately, it's the talented people in your organizations that have options. And they're the ones who are going to be at the greatest risk of migration. So just important to know. And part of it has to do with this graphic from before. Folks have really gotten used to the concept of blending their lives at home and at work, and it feels good. Families that can be, together in the morning or mid-afternoon if they've got kids in school age, right? It's something that's played out over and over and over again, and they don't want to give it up. And they feel like, especially as the millennials, they feel like they've earned it, right? They've been in the workforce 10 plus years. They have some decent responsibility and some autonomy they feel like they've earned, and they would like to be in command of their own schedule. And so flexibility, the more you can put in, the more benefit you'll get from it. Even though I know there are lots of situations, and our clients are amongst them, that have flat out work from work jobs. So the key is, how do you make those people feel as valued as those that you give flexibility to? That's another topic that we spend a lot of time talking about. And really, the other part of our research was combing social media and looking for all the clues we could find. And it's unfortunately not that fun to do, because you see a lot of things like this. A lot of folks that are just saying, I don't want to be told how to be flexible. If I have to, I will look elsewhere if somebody makes me go back into the office. And it's everywhere, everywhere. It's too much to ignore. Thankfully, there are some out there, although they're the minority, that are suggesting, yes, we want to go back, right? I can't be the only one who doesn't want to go back, as you see in this latest one that come in. It would be sad if we didn't, if we had to do everything online. And I would agree, a blend is wonderful. But the more and more you look, the more and more you see this desire for flexibility. And again, it's difficult to ignore. So many companies around the country, these are just 4 small examples: American Express, Microsoft, huge companies, right? Ford, Slack, across industries, obviously, financial tech, automotive, they are making plans, putting plans in place to really make permanent a hybrid work environment and flexibility. But we're seeing it all over the place in private companies too. In fact, one of our clients, a community bank, a traditionally 100% work from work, and even, they have all kinds of regulatory issues that they have to deal with. They've even gone and are putting in place a policy around flexibility and work from home. And it's all because of this issue we're talking about. So if we can implore you to do that, I think it would be really in your best interest to find out how that works in your context. Okay, doubling down on a sense of belonging. We need to spend just a little bit of time unpacking what this means, but we're back to Bridget, and it's really about connection to people, connection to purpose, connecting how her success contributes to the success of her organization, because it matters to her. Also matters to culture. We just show this graphic because we did ask people to talk about what's most important to defining positive culture in the modern workplace, as we like to talk about it. And the concept, which is very much a combined concept, sense of belonging and good team relationships are synonymous. And it was overwhelmingly the largest contributor to positive culture in the eyes of millennials. Again, you see flexible work schedule. And for those that talked about career development opportunities before as being important to millennials, you're correct. And it shows up here. It still is something that's really important. They want to tie their success and see the path. So what is a sense of belonging? So we went out and we said, okay, everybody pick your top 3. Tell us what it's defined as. Gave them a bunch of different options, but these are the 3 that came in consistently the highest. So knowing how their role connects to the broader purpose, connection to purpose. Second, meaningful connection to one or more of their colleagues, connection to people, right? And then finally, feeling that their personal contribution matters to the organization. So recognition lives in that, certainly, but also just being able to track it in regular and real time. Unpacking this, this is the top 3. Unpacking this for a number 1, even though it looks like it comes in second, it actually comes in first: meaningful connection to people. By a margin of 40% over the next, which is connecting their role to the bigger picture. So meaningful connection to one or more colleagues, really important. And honestly, that's good news. I think that's something that with a little bit of intention, a little bit of work, can actually be achieved with a lot of success. And that's where we go next. A sense of belonging. How do we really create it? And the reality is it takes a lot of intention. And I guess we'll answer this question really in the eyes or from the perspective of our clients right now and where we're doing most of our work. We're doing an awful lot of work right now relaunching relationships. Again, work from work, work from home, doesn't matter. People are relaunching relationships that have been stressed, challenged in some way through social distance, emotional distance, actual distance. So we're bringing people together in person to do team building events. Sometimes they're overnight retreats, sometimes they're even a 2-hour or full day session in an office, trying to bring people together, share some stories, and just connect as human beings. And it has a really big impact. Okay, so it's event driven, that we're trying to relaunch. So that's important. And also building a platform for your people. So, this is ours, obviously, and those of you that work with us, how we use this and train around it. But our UMAP product is really, and it doesn't have to be the UMAP, it can be anything, any way that you can get to know better what's important to your people, what they value, what they aspire to, so that you can create personalization for them at some scale and have it live right alongside direct communication about what they're responsible for and how they're measured and how their success contributes to the overall success of the organization, right? Connection to their purpose, connection to connecting their contributions to the overall organization. And those things need to be communicated all the time, right? Not just through an event, but all the time. So whatever you can do to gather that knowledge and communicate in real time with your people around those things, super important to connecting and to creating the sense of belonging based on millennials' own responses. And then finally, putting that into your normal operating cadence to connect their roles and contributions to your purpose and their success. We do this through regular coaching conversations that we do quarterly in our business, but our clients have done anywhere from monthly to quarterly to semi-annually. And truth be told, we are doing war with the old top-down competency-driven annual review process, which is threatening to everyone and not that positive or effective. And so, especially as it relates to millennials and Gen Zs, and this is not part of our survey, but many of you who have worked with this generation probably already know, this is a generation that absolutely craves feedback. Positive, they love affirmation, but they also are very open to constructive feedback, far more so than I am, which I've been, it's been really gratifying. It's wonderful to have somebody on the other end of something that would crush me, especially when it's given in a human way. Be really receptive to growth and any of that constructive criticism. So it's really, really important to have in your regular operating cadence a way to do this, to really operationalize and make it a part of your regular culture, not just events. Events are important, but having a platform for perpetuity and then a conversation that you're committed to give real-time feedback is incredibly important. So that's how you create, with intention, some sense of belonging on a broader basis. So this next slide, though, proximity as a crutch, when you really get the win from sense of belonging is when you make it something that is truly organic within your organization and that is driven by your people. And so proximity as a crutch, it's kind of a curious title for this slide, but this, if I can use the terms in the same sentence, the gift of COVID, because it didn't really give any gifts, but the one positive that we took out of it is we realized that proximity was in fact a crutch. So, we're a small team. We live here in 6,000 square feet. We're running around, we're talking to each other every single day pre-pandemic, bantering, we get to know each other, we feel like we have good friendships. COVID hits, that all of course gets blown up. We get thrown to the winds in our homes as a non-essential business. And then, we did what many of you did, right? Which is, okay, we're going to meet a ton, right? We met morning, planned the day, met late day. How do we do? Accountability, rinse and repeat. We took our quarterly planning cycle and made it 30 days so that we could make some rapid decisions. And that was really important for us to do some things that we needed to be competitive and evolve with the current environment. And frankly, saved our business and put it in a position to grow. But what we realized was, once we went through that situation, that we grew closer as a team. Strangely, even though we were 100% remote and remain mostly remote, and we realized that proximity is just a crutch. If you're in the same office, it doesn't mean you have a close team or you have a sense of belonging. You have to be intentional, no matter where, how you structure your office environment. And so that was the wonderful thing. And one of the best things that we'll leave you with is, the best tactic that we employed is probably the most simple. We started, after we backed off this meet in the morning, meet in the afternoon, and kind of avoided burnout, to say, we're going to settle in on a meeting cadence. And it's going to be a couple of business meetings a week. And there's going to be 1 hour that we are going to carve out that is 100% related to team building, no business, none. And we do it Thursday mornings, right? So, is today Thursday? I'm losing track. Yeah, we did it this morning. And the way we structure it is somebody else on our team or our teams is in charge of it every single week. And they get to run it however they want to run it, but no business. And so we spend that hour just connecting in all kinds of fun ways, right? I mean, like we've had people just ask simple questions that have turned into something crazy. Like, when's the last time you had a good belly laugh, right? Sounds harmless, but I'm telling you, there wasn't, you'll not have a dry eye around the room, and it won't be from sadness. It was just hilarious story after hilarious story. We had one of our colleagues do, if you're familiar with MTV Cribs, the old show, I don't know if it's still on or not. He wanted to do just BU Cribs. That's us. And so we had people walking around doing their video of their homes and their kids and their dirty kitchens and unhappy spouses occasionally. But it was a blast, absolute blast. And one time we did what we call a MEPS check-in. And many of you may have heard of MEPS. It's not our doing. It's just something that we like to do. Where we'll do a check-in on MEPS, right? It's an acronym. So we go around the room and, hey, how's everybody feeling along these dimensions? And MEPS stands for how are you feeling mentally, E, emotionally, P, physically, and S, either spiritually or socially, and give people the option there. And you just kind of go around the room. And when we did that, this is where, another concept that we really want to drive home for folks, and that it lives within our training, is if you find yourself as a leader of a team, leader of an organization, and you have an opportunity to show a little bit of personal vulnerability to your team, it will have an amazing impact on the environment that you create for others. And you will be amazed at how they, will follow and be encouraged by that lead. And this is, I guess, one story that happened with me and my MEPS check-in. We went around and it caught me at the right time. And I was honest with everybody. And I just said, hey, folks, listen, mentally, emotionally, I'm frazzled, right? I'm a little bit of a wreck. I need a little grace these next few weeks, because within this very narrow portion of time, I have, my oldest daughter graduating from college, moving to Southern California. I have my middle daughter who's in college in Atlanta, moving to Boston, and then back to Atlanta, right? All within a short period of time. My youngest daughter graduated from high school and is moving off to college. And in the meantime, blew out her knee and had to have surgery, right? And now she's recovering. And then we were also dealing with a serious problem of addiction in my family, which was really, really crushing the family in a big way. And so I was able to sit down and say, listen, these things are going on with me. And this is all happening in a 45-day period. We're super busy at work, and I'm getting smoked up here. So please give me a little bit of grace. And so I was able to do that. Not an hour past that meeting, I had personal letters of encouragement, affirmation coming from all over the place, which was exactly what I needed, right, at the time. It also just bound us together in such a big way. Last story I'll share is one that happened just organically, similarly in this meeting. And, often we ask light questions. And this time we did ask another light question. It was, what's your, favorite smell, favorite sight, favorite sound? And we heard things like one of our colleagues, favorite smell, skunk. That's an interesting one. And then we had, favorite sights, thinking about sunsets and sunrises and mountains and rivers and lakes and things like that. And then favorite sounds all over the place. And one really struck us by surprise. And it was one of our colleagues. It got to her and she said, my favorite sound is the sound of silence, which got our attention. And she seemed pretty, sober about it. And she shared a story about the fact that she was very close to her grandmother, always had been. And she and her grandmother had been in this regular, cadence of getting together every week, and they would sit together and they would pray together. And they did this over time. And as her grandmother got older and eventually toward the end of her life, it became more of our friend, our colleague, sitting and doing, and praying and just being with her in silence until she sat and prayed with her and sat in silence listening to her breathing. And then she heard her last breath. And all of us, were kind of sitting there in silence ourselves, not a dry eye in the place, right? But the story really wasn't about sadness at all. And she was explaining to us, it was about the beauty of being able to have that relationship all the way up until the very end and experiencing that with her and how that memory sticks with her to this day. And so if you can create an environment where people can be that human, right? That feel that safe to share at that level, that is a sense of belonging. And it's irreplaceable. And I don't care how many recruiters call, how many offers are made. If you create that, those calls don't get returned. And money is not going to lead them to other places because you can't replace that. And that's where I'm going to conclude our comments about sense of belonging. So we covered a lot of territory and I'm wrapping up. Obviously, we talked about 2020 and framed the context for how people are feeling in 2021 and why we have what feels like a talent transfer upon us. But we firmly believe this future of work, if you're able to connect into sense of belonging at its highest levels, and the flexibility aspect, super important, that you're going to position yourself as the beneficiary and not be the victim of this. And we feel really good about the client work that we do that helps. So obviously always looking to connect in with people. So review, key learnings from today, generation matters, reminding primarily the mirror, one size does not fit all within generations. So don't be biased. Priorities are shifting. We talked about that quite a bit and how we can prepare because we are blending flexibility and connection. And then again, be that talent beneficiary. If you make some investments in your business, it's really not too late. In fact, you can be well out in front and people talk. Like in your industry, in your community, if you develop a strong culture around these concepts, they will talk and they will bring people in. And this has been shown in our businesses in prior lives and in our business here. We have a strange ability to attract more talent, frankly, than we can employ today. Which brings me back and finally to Bridget and Catherine. We're actually talking to both of these folks and are continuing to. So Bridget's looking, as I mentioned earlier, and we're not ready for her. And so she's going to take the next 6 months or so, maybe longer. And yeah, money matters, but like I said, it always matters. And she is really most interested in us because of the sense of belonging. She feels like she can have a real impact here. She can connect to our purpose, and the people that she's met, she's been really encouraged by. So we're going to reconnect after first of the year. And in the meantime, her employer may do everything that they have to do in order to keep her. But if not, my guess is she'll be with us. And the same is true of Catherine, even though she was offered double, more than, and is doing the job now, she's not getting what she really wants, which is a sense of belonging. And so this fall, we're going to revisit with her. And I'm sure we'll have to come up a little bit, but not a lot. And we'll get her as well. So we feel really good about that. If that's how much we care or believe in this concept of a sense of belonging. And that concludes our conversation today. We are Become Unmistakable. Again, I'm Rob. I'd love to connect with anybody here. And before I move into our QR code, though, I think we have a few questions that I need to address. So we're right at time, but we've got, how would you recommend we continue building engagement when some want to be together in person and others don't feel comfortable or aren't located close enough? Okay, so that was our question from before. I hope I answered that. And it is this combination of in-person and in-screen where you can still generate that same, proximity as a crutch, the same opportunities to build teams are there. If you can find a way to connect people in person once in a while, I think that's enough. That's worked for us anyway. How do companies that have employees that have to work from work compete in this type of a job market? So this is a challenge, but not an insurmountable challenge. So we have, many clients that are answering this exact same question, and they're trying to put some flexibility in where they haven't been willing to do so before. Again, we've seen this in banking, construction, other manufacturing, other folks that are taking these jobs that they can put flexibility into, and then focusing on those that they can't. And saying, we're going to find a way to create an added benefit for those folks. It does come at some cost, but other costs are actually coming down. There is a lot of travel costs, sales costs, things that are now done remotely that can fund some of these things. But just one good example that we've heard, creating an allotment of hours, for example, for somebody who's running a machine who has to stay, for the period of time, giving them hours during the year, during the period, however you want to define it, where they can take more personal time, whether it's to go visit their kid's school or go volunteer somewhere, et cetera. So giving them a little bit of an added benefit is something that we've seen over and over provided. And we would be happy to connect with more specific examples. And then what tools do you recommend to help create a sense of belonging in a hybrid situation? Thank you to whoever asked that question. I was asked that question also 2 days ago when I did a version of this talk in person to a large banking conference. And of course, our tools are the ones that we think everybody should use. Our UMAP tool is very much a tool that was designed around this issue, right? So we designed it to create a sense of belonging while creating a deep connection to purpose and success of the organization. And that's an accountability measure too, that we then roll out on a quarterly basis. And that's something that has been tried in other organizations that we have run. So we've been doing this a while. And I'd be happy to share what that success looks like offline if anybody wants to connect individually. So I apologize, I'm 2 minutes over. Lots of content. I appreciate everybody sticking with us and appreciate the questions and participation in the polls. And more than anything, appreciate you connecting with us and being a part of the BU family. We are in fact a family and we hope to grow it. So tell your friends. And so last and not least, if you would like a copy of our latest survey, you can hit this QR code right now and you'll be taken directly to where you can download it. And that's all I have for you today. So thanks again so much. Everybody be well. Take care.